In this video, I'll teach you FastAPI by working through a real project. I'll go over everything from the absolute basics to some more advanced concepts like setting up authentication, logging in various users, connecting to a database, and all of the components that you actually need if you want to build a real production-grade application. Now that said, this video is not designed for absolute beginners. While I will teach you everything from scratch as it relates to APIs and kind of web app development, I'm going to assume that you have some experience in Python. That said, let's quickly have a look at the finished project and then we'll get into some of the theory and start writing some code. So the project we'll be building here is a simple photo and video sharing application. Think of it like the really early days of Instagram, except it won't have nearly as many features. Now the way this works is you can sign in. So I've set up a really simple user interface here in something called Streamlit. We'll talk a little bit about that later in the video, but this isn't going to be focused on building the interface. It's more going to be focused on the backend and the logic and the, API with FastAPI. So you can see that I was able to sign in here, and then immediately I'm brought to a feed where I can see some different photos. I can see the date they were posted and the user that posted them. And then I also have some videos as well. Now you have the ability to upload something. So for example, if you were to come here and let's just pick maybe a random photo that we have here. Okay, let's just go like this and call this thumbnail. And then we share it. It's just going to take a second. And then this will be uploaded to our feed. So right now it's just uploading the video. And if we go back to the feed here, we should see the photo appear. And you can see the photo shows up by us. And then it's on today's date when I'm recording this video. Okay, so that's the application. I know it seems pretty basic, but I promise this is going to teach you a ton of concepts that you need to understand as it relates to FastAPI. And I think the most important thing is all of the authentication and authorization, which most people skip in these beginner type tutorials. So with that said, let's hop over to this Miro board that I put together because I want to start going through some theory that's really important to understand before we can even start building APIs. And by the way, as we get later into the video and we're going to start setting up the images and videos, that is notoriously pretty difficult to do. In order to do that effectively, we're going to use today's sponsor, ImageKit. Don't worry, they're free to use and play with. You don't need to pay for them, and they just make this process significantly easier. So big shout out to them, but more on that later. Okay. So let's get into the video. Now we're going to use FastAPI, right? This is Fast Application Programming Interface. That's what API stands for. Now this is essentially a back-end framework. What that means is that this is going to be running on some type of server and it is going to be essentially controlling data. All an API really does for us is it facilitates the access and control of data. In our case, it's going to be image or video posts, right? Or different user accounts. But before we can get into all of that, we need to start understanding some kind of core concepts of web apps in general. So let's start by talking about URLs and endpoints so that we can get the terminology out of the way. Now, this whole thing right here, and this one as well, is a URL. You've seen this, millions of times before, especially when you've browsed to a website. And I want to just go over the components of the URL so that we understand what they are. Now, the first is the domain, okay? The domain is essentially the website, the base of the URL. So training.devlaunch.us, this is our domain. techwithtim.net, this is the domain. The domain will typically end in like .us or .com or .net or .ca or something along those lines. Now, after the domain, you have what's referred to as the path or sometimes called the endpoint. Now, this is the particular route or kind of the page or resource that you're going to be accessing from this domain. So for example, we have training.devlaunch.us/tim. So I'm going to the /tim page, right? Here, /courses/Python. So I'm going to the Python courses page, right? And for a typical website, these make a lot of sense. But for our APIs, we're going to have to design these ourselves to kind of control the access and the route or the endpoint to particular resources. So when we look at the project that we're going to build here, where we're sharing, videos or photos, we might have an endpoint that is, our api.com/photo, right? And then we can access a particular photo. You'll see what I mean in a second, but let's keep going. Now, the next point is the query parameter. Now, the query parameter is some extra bit of information that is typically used to filter the page or to get some more specific type of data. It always will come after a question mark, so you'll see some kind of path or endpoint, a question mark, and then one or multiple query parameters. In this case, we have a parameter, video, equal to 1, 2, 3, okay? And then if we come here, we have UTM source is equal to YouTube, and page is equal to 2. So we have 2 parameters, and you can have as many parameters as you like. You just have to have these ampersands that separates them, okay? So just understand that these are the core components of a URL and an endpoint. Now let's keep going here and talk about the request and the response structure. So whenever we visit some type of website, we refer to that website as the client or the front end, okay? So us as a user, we go to our computer, we type, some website.com, okay? And then we are now on the client or the front end, okay? And the front end is this kind of visual interface that we're able to interact with, that we're able to use. In the case of our post application or our photo application, we can see the different posts, right? We can make a post, we can sign in, we can sign out. Now, the way that that actually works behind the scenes is that this user interface is communicating with some type of API. API stands for Application Programming Interface. The API you can essentially see as kind of a secure layer. It's running on a different device, some kind of server, so some computer essentially sitting in some location, and it's facilitating all of the access to our data. So if we want to sign into our account, we send a request from the front end or the client to this API, and this API returns some response, okay? This is the flow that I'm trying to get you to understand. You go to some website, you do something. If this thing involves some access to data, right, especially if it's maybe some confidential data or something, what needs to happen is a request will be sent to some backend, this kind of secure location. It will essentially check, can this user do the thing that they want to do? And then if they can, it will send this response back doing that thing. For example, deleting a post, we would send a request to the backend. The backend would say, okay, yep, I'm going to be able to delete this post. And then it would return the response saying, hey, this post was deleted. I want to upload a photo. I send a request to my backend. I say I want to upload some photo. It returns some response and says, yes, your photo was uploaded successfully. So all of the heavy lifting, all of the secure operations, everything related to data essentially takes place on this backend or this API. And that's what I'm going to be showing you how to build in this video. Now, when we send a request, so we have this front end, right, this client, it sends some data to the backend. And the main parts of a request are the following, okay? We have a type of the request, which we're going to talk about in a minute, or the method. We have a path. The path is what we looked at here, right? So this path or this endpoint. And oops, I didn't mean to save that. And we have a body. This is optional, but this includes additional data that we want to send along with the request. So for example, like the image that we want to upload, or the caption, or the name of the post, or something like that. And then we have headers. This is typically other additional information that has to do with things like authentication. So in the header of our request, we would include something that indicates that we are, this user. Okay, we are signed in as, Tim at techwithtim.net. The header would kind of indicate that when we send that to the backend. I know this seems a little bit vague. Just bear with me. We're going to make all of this crystal clear, when we actually get into the API example. We then have the response, okay? So the request is the thing that we send from the front end to the back end, essentially saying, hey, we want to do something. And the response is what comes back from the back end to our front end or to our client. Remember, the front end is the thing that you as the user actually see. And then the back end is the thing that we as the developer typically write that facilitates all of the communication and the data. So from the response, we include a status code. You may have seen something like, 404 before, which means not found. That's an example of a status code. So our backend will send a status code to the front end indicating what happened with the request. Common status codes are something like 200, for example, which means successful. I'm going to show you a few more in a second, and you get the idea. Then we have a body. Same as we have the body in the request, we can send some additional data back to the front end that the front end may need. And then we have headers. Same thing, headers will be related to typically security, authentication, the type of data, some weird things like that. If I scroll down here, I'm just going to show you a few status codes and a few of the request types, which are important to understand. Actually, let's start with the request types. So here's an example of a very simple API. This is a books API, and this is the /books route or path or endpoint or whatever you want to call it. Now you can see that we have something called a get endpoint. What this means is that we are retrieving some data from this resource, essentially, from /books. We then have delete. This is the type of method you would use when you want to delete something. We have post. This is the type of method you use when you want to create something. And you have put. This is the type of method you would use when you want to update something. So remember how I mentioned when we send a request, we specify some type or some method, and that indicates what the front end wants to do. So if the front end wants to get some data about some books, it sends a get request. If it wants to delete a book, it sends a delete request. If it wants to create a new book, it sends a post request. And you can send all of these requests to the same route or the same endpoint, okay? And based on the type of the request, you can do something different. So I hope that makes sense, but these are the common methods or types of requests that you can send. Then we go over to HTTP status codes. Now, you don't need to memorize all of this, but these are just some examples of status codes that you may see. So you send this request, right? You say, hey, I want to get a book, for example. All right, then what the backend or the API is going to do is it's going to retrieve that data for you. It's going to send it to you. And along with that, it's going to give you a status code. So for example, it may say 200, which means okay. It may say 201 because it created something. You know, you get all these different ones like these redirection. You have errors like bad request, unauthorized, payment required, a bunch of stuff that you can look at, you know, internal server error. Don't need to memorize them. I'm just showing you that there's a bunch of status codes that are commonly used in web development. Okay, now let's just have a look at an example request and response, and I promise we'll get into the API. And again, this will all crystallize, but this is just going to really help you understand how we design the APIs. Okay, so user wants to update a post that they made. So the type is patch. This is actually the exact same thing as put. So if you ever see patch, it's the same as put, which just means you want to update something. If I wanted to create something, I would use post, right? But I don't want to do that. I want to update, so I'm using patch. Okay, so the type or the method of my request is patch. The path is /API/post, and then this is the ID of the post. So I'm saying, okay, I want to go to my API. I want to modify post. This is the ID of the post that I want to modify. And then the body would be this. This is the data that I'm actually sending where I'm saying, hey, this is the updated title, and this is the new caption that I want to use or the description or whatever for my post. Then the headers includes this. This is essentially my authorization token indicating, hey, I'm authorized to be able to perform this operation because of this thing right here, which we'll talk about later on. So we take all of this, we send this to our backend, and then this is the request, okay, that we create. Now from the backend, we get a response back. So we send a request, we get a response back, and the response looks like this. We have status code 204, which stands for updated. And then we have some body, and this body says, hey, this is the title, this is the description, this is the post ID, this is when it was updated, this is when it was created, and it gives us that information back to the front end so we can display it to the user. We then have some headers, and in this case we say, hey, the type of data that we're returning back here is application/JSON, which is essentially just the format of this data, which we can talk about later. Okay. I know that's a lot of information, but that is the kind of flow of an API, and hopefully this is going to help us understand how we create APIs in a minute when we start coding them out. Now, last thing that we'll talk about a little bit later, I'll just quickly show it to you, is the authentication. So when it comes to using an authenticated API, it's a little bit more complex than simply sending requests and getting responses. Essentially, what you need to do is get something called a JWT token. This JWT token looks something like this, where you send this along with every single request to indicate, hey, I'm authorized to perform this type of operation, essentially. You're identifying yourself and what user you are so that the API knows you can do this thing or you can't do this thing. We'll look at that later. I don't want to confuse you at this point, but that is kind of the primer on web app development and APIs. Again, think of an API as essentially this kind of back-end server that sits there that facilitates all of the operations that have to deal with data. Creating, reading, updating, deleting data. That's effectively what an API almost always deals with. And it's doing that so it can do it in a secure way and then return data to some front end where the user can view it, display it, mess with it, etc. So with that said, let's get onto the computer and let's start actually writing some code in FastAPI. All right, so I'm inside of my code editor here, and for this video, I'm going to be using PyCharm. Now you can use any code editor or IDE that you want, but I typically do recommend PyCharm, especially for Python projects because, well, it is PyCharm and it supports Python the best. In fact, I do actually have a long-term partnership with PyCharm, so if you want to use it for free, you can click the link in the description, try it out, and see if you like it. It definitely is a great editor, and again, what I recommend for pretty much any heavy Python projects. Okay, so what I've done inside of PyCharm is I've just opened up a new folder. You can see I've got a folder here called FastAPI Tutorial. The way I did that is I essentially just went to Open, and I just opened a folder on my desktop. Okay, and you can again use any editor that you want. Just make sure you open a folder. Now from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my terminal and I'm going to start setting up my FastAPI project. Now, in order to do that in Python, you need to use something called a package manager. There's two notable package managers in Python. The first is pip. The second is UV. Now, I'm going to suggest that you use UV because this is significantly more modern and it just works a lot better. But if you don't want to use UV, you can replace the commands I'm going to show you with pip. Okay, so UV is something that you need to install. If you don't have it installed, I will leave a video on screen that explains how to do so. But once you have UV installed on your computer, what you can do from this open folder is you can type UV init and then dot. What this is going to do is create a new UV project for you where you're able to isolate all of the dependencies for this particular project in this kind of one folder. Okay, so we're going to type UV init dot. What that's going to do for you is it's going to create a few files inside of your folder. You're going to see a main.py file, a pyproject.toml, and a few other files that you don't really need to worry about too much. Now, this pyproject.toml file is going to include all of the dependencies for your project, and it's what we're going to start modifying now by installing some different dependencies that we need for this project. So if you want to work with FastAPI, in order to do that, you need to install it. So what we're going to do is we're going to type UV add, and then we're going to start by just adding FastAPI. Okay, so we're going to type UV add FastAPI. When we do that, if we go back into pyproject.toml, you'll see this dependency has automatically been added for us. Okay. Now that we have it installed, we'll be able to actually use it inside of our Python code. Now, as well as FastAPI, what we're going to do is we're going to type UV add, and we're going to install python-.env. Now, this is something that we need to use to manage environment variables because in a minute, we're going to have some environment variables for handling our images and videos. So we're going to go ahead and install this. Now, there's a few other things that we need to install as well, so just bear with me. We're going to type UV add, and we're going to install FastAPI -users, and then inside of square brackets, we're going to type SQL alchemy like this. Okay, so make sure it's spelled exactly like this. UV add FastAPI-users SQL alchemy. This is what we're going to use when we start handling the authentication and the authorization later on in our project. So we're going to go ahead and press enter, and then same thing, it should get added to our dependencies. Okay, there's a few other ones that we're going to need here. So we're going to type UV add, and then we're going to add the ImageKit. So we're going to say ImageKit like this. It's going to be ImageKit IO. Now, this is the package we're going to use to handle our images and videos, again, which we'll look at later on. We're also going to say UV add, and we're going to add UVcorn, and then standard. UVcorn is a web server in Python that allows us to serve our FastAPI application. You'll see how that works in 1 minute. So we're going to add UVcorn, and I promise we are almost done, just a few more that we need to add. And then, we're going to add one more here, which is going to be AIO-SQLite like that. We're going to use this for interacting with our database. We may potentially need some more later, but for now, I think this should be fine, and that should handle all of the dependencies that we need for this project. Okay, so we're going to close that, and we're just going to quickly go here and make a new environment variable file. Now, to do that, we're going to go new file, and we're going to call this file .env. This is the file that you create when you want to store sensitive credentials, tokens, or keys that your application is going to rely on. In our case, we need to access a key for ImageKit, which is going to allow us to handle the image and video uploads, which I want to do now. Okay, so inside of this file, there are 3 variables that we need to define. The first is going to be ImageKit_private_key. All right, the next is going to be the ImageKit_public_key. And then the last is going to be the ImageKit_URL. Okay, so we're going to put equal signs for all of these, and we're just going to quickly grab these 3 values so we don't need to come back to this until much later in the video. Now, you may be wondering, what the heck are we doing, Tim? We haven't even started writing the API. I promise we're going to get there. I just want to get through everything, do all of the setup, and make sure that it's all ready to go so we can just focus on coding and I'm not moving around too much. Right now, what we're doing is we're creating this essentially kind of secret environment variable file. This is something that's going to hold some values that we need for uploading the images and videos. Like I mentioned, we're going to use ImageKit to do this. So what I need to do is get some keys and values from ImageKit. So I'm quickly just going to open up the ImageKit website. I'm going to leave a link to this in the description. What we're going to do is we're just going to make a new account on here. Again, it is free to use this. You do not need to pay for it. And essentially what this does is give you all kinds of amazing tools for handling your images and videos, which is typically a huge pain. But they have all kinds of things like image and video optimization, formatting, cropping. It's very interesting. So anyways, what we're going to do is make a new account. I've already just made a new one. So again, I'll leave that link in the description. And from here, what we're going to do is go on on to the developer options. From developer options, we're going to look for our public key, our private key, and then we're going to get our URL, which is up here. So I'm going to copy my public key, and then I'm going to put my public key right here. I then am going to copy my private key, which is something that you do not want to share with other people. And before it will allow you to do this, you do need to set a password for your account. So if you press this, I'm just going to blur my email, but I'll press the profile page and I'll just quickly set a password. Okay, now the password is set. So we'll go back to developer options. We'll go private key, and I'm just going to copy this after I use my password. So let's use that and copy this. Okay, so now that I've copied it, I'm going to go back to PyCharm. I'm going to paste it. Again, don't share this with other people. I will delete it afterwards. And then lastly, we're going to grab this URL endpoint, okay, which should be right up here. And we're going to paste this inside. And now we have the keys that we need. Okay, so we're going to close the environment variable file. And now what we're going to do is start setting up kind of the scaffolding for our project. So I'm going to make a new folder. And this folder is going to be called SRC. This is typically best practice when you're writing a FastAPI application. You create this source, or actually let's change it to be an app directory where you actually have all of the code for your application. And then you have this main.py file, which is kind of what triggers the application to run. So what we're going to do inside of this app folder is we're going to make a new file, and we're going to call this app.py. And this is where we're going to start actually writing our FastAPI app and start getting into some Python code. All right, so let's start writing a API. We've gotten to the point where everything is set up. What we're going to do from this file right here. So from here, we're going to type from FastAPI, import FastAPI with this capitalization. And we're going to say app is equal to FastAPI with a set of parentheses. Now, this is the FastAPI application that we just created. And what we'll need to do now is start setting up the different paths or endpoints that we want to have accessible on our API. Now, remember, for our API, we're setting this up essentially to handle data, to be able to accept some type of request from our front end or our client and to return some type of data. So we can create data, delete data, read data, update data, right? We need to decide because we're designing this API. So I'm going to start by just writing some simple dummy endpoints just to test and see how this works. Then we'll get into endpoints that actually make more sense. So the way that you make an endpoint in FastAPI is you type app, which is the name of this variable right here that we defined, dot, and then you specify the method for this particular endpoint. So it can be get, post, put, delete, depending on what you want this to do. Now the most basic type, which is common, is to use app.get. Now, when you do this, what you're going to do is you're going to specify the endpoint. So we're going to say slash, and then something like, hello-world, okay? So this is the path or the endpoint. Now, I also forgot I need to put an @ symbol here because this needs to be a decorator in FastAPI. A decorator is something with the @ before it. And what you do beneath this is you define a function. The function should typically be named something similar to this endpoint or path, but it doesn't need to be. You put a set of parentheses, and then inside of here, you can return some data. So let's just quickly return the auto-completed data where it says message, hello world. Okay, so we have @app.get / hello world. What we're saying is, hey, when you go to our API and you go to / hello world, this function is going to be called, and then we're going to return this data. Now, the data that we always return from our endpoints is either going to be a Pydantic object, which we'll talk about later. I know that might not make a lot of sense, or it's going to be a Python dictionary. The Python dictionary looks like this, right? You have some key associated with some value. And the reason why we return Python dictionaries is because when we create APIs, we work with something called JSON. Now, JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It is the format essentially for dealing with data across the web, and you can essentially think of JSON the exact same as you would think as a Python dictionary, okay? It's not exactly the same. There's a few minor differences, but in our case, we can assume that anything that is a valid Python dictionary will be a valid JSON object. Again, keep in mind there's some caveats there, but generally that is the case, especially with simple data. Okay. So now we've got this application, right? We've defined this endpoint, but what we need to do is run it. Now, there's many different ways to run the API, but the way that I'm going to suggest we do it is by going into this main.py file here, deleting everything inside of here, and then importing this app file and running it using something called Uvicorn. So what we're going to do is we're going to say import Uvicorn like this. We're then going to say if __ name is equal to __ main __. Then we're going to say uvicorn.run. We're going to put app .app::app. I know this seems weird. I'll explain what it is in 1 second. We're going to say host is equal to 0.0.0.0. And we're going to say the port is equal to 8000. And we're going to say reload is equal to true. Okay. Now, what are we doing here? Well, first, what we're saying is, all right, I want to use this web server called Uvicorn, which we've already installed, right, with UV, and I want to run a web server. Now, for the web server, I want to run an API on it. The API that I want to run is app.app, so that's inside of app, so the app folder here, the app file, and then I want to run the API, which is inside of the variable app. So let's say I were to change this, and I called this hi, okay? Then I would change this to be hi, all right? So just keep that in mind. That's how I'm getting these variables essentially. So we have the name of the folder is app, right? The name of the Python application is app. And then this here is app. And we have app.app::app. Probably should have picked a better name for that, but it's okay. Hopefully you get the idea. Now, when I say host, this is specifying the domain essentially that I want to run this server on. Because we're running this locally on our own computer, when I specify 0.0.0.0, that just means run it on any available domain. So it's going to run on what's called localhost, which is just our own host, so only we can access it, as well as our private IP address, meaning anyone else on the network would be able to access this as well if they knew the private IP address of this machine. Now, there is ways to run this publicly so anyone can access it. Not going to get into that in this video, but essentially the way that you're going to be able to access this application is you're going to go to whatever the IP address of this machine is. If we're on the same machine, it's going to be localhost. We're going to go to port 8000, and then we can access this resource right here, which is /hello-world. So for this, what we can do is run this main.py file. To do that, we simply type uv run main.py. Go ahead and press enter, and it says that there's some issue. This is because I'm currently running this app on another editor. So let me just shut the other app down and rerun it, and then we should be good to go. You can see that it's running now. Again, that issue you wouldn't have run into. It's because I had a demo application running in a different editor that I have open. You'll see what's happened here is it now says Uvicorn running on, and then it shows you the URL or the domain where this is running, right? And then it kind of goes through this thing saying, hey, started the reloader process. And by me specifying reload equals true, anytime I save or make a change to this file, like if I do something, I don't know, hello here, and then I save this, you'll notice that the server will shut down and restart with the changes that I made. So it's really useful for when we're debugging and building something because it just shuts down and restarts anytime you make a change. Now, if I want to actually be able to view my application, what I can do is go to this URL. So you can just click it and open it up. Now it's saying this 0.0.0 isn't working. So what we can do is change this to be 127.0.0.1 or localhost port 8000. And when we do that, it should give us this thing here saying detail not found. That is totally fine. That's exactly what we're expecting. Okay, so our API is now running, and it's time to talk about the coolest feature of FastAPI, which is the Docs endpoint. So here, what you can do whenever you have a FastAPI application is you can go to /docs. Okay, when you do that, it's going to bring you to a page that looks like this, which actually specifies all of the endpoints and the configuration that you've set up for your API. So from here, if I open this up, we'll be able to actually test out our API by pressing this try out button. This is going to send a sample request to this endpoint and then tell us what the response would have been. So what I can do is press try it out. I can press execute, and then you see what it does is it sends a request to this URL, and then it tells me that I got this as my response saying message hello world. And then it also told me the code of this was 200, which means success. Okay, 200 successful response. So there you go. We just sent a request, right? We tested it out. It's all working. This is the thing I love about FastAPI is that you can actually do this. You can directly go here and test out all of your endpoints by simply going to this /docs endpoint. This will become more useful later on, but always check this out. It's very, very useful. Now, there's also another endpoint called /redoc. This is kind of a newer version of that docs endpoint. It works the exact same way. We can test this out if we want, test the API, et cetera, and kind of see how this works. I am not going to dive into this too much right now, but the point is there's this other endpoint called redoc, which you should be aware of, but the one that I prefer to use is called /docs. Now, just another quick thing, if we wanted to, we also could just directly go to /hello-world. If we do that, you see it will give us message, hello world, because we set up a get endpoint. And by default, whenever you go to a URL in your browser, you send what's called a get request, right? And because we sent the get request, we got the response back, and the browser is able to actually render it and show it for us. But generally, for all of the other endpoint requests we're going to be looking at, we're going to have to use this /docs page or another tool to test the API. So we've now written kind of this dummy get endpoint. However, it doesn't really help us accomplish our project goal, right, of creating, posts. So what I want to do now is I want to start adjusting the endpoint to actually make sense to our project. It will change over time, but we're going to slowly kind of build towards what's called a CRUD application, where we have create, read, update, and delete functionality. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to start setting up some stuff for handling posts. So what I want to do is I want to set up my application so I can essentially retrieve and create new user posts. For now, we're going to start with text posts, but then later we'll get into the images. So I'm going to make a new dictionary, and I'm going to call this my text posts is equal to, and we're just going to have an empty dictionary like this, okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to make an endpoint, and we're going to say @app.get, and this is going to be /posts, okay? And for the function, we're going to say define get all posts like that. Now what this is going to do is just return all of the posts that we have. So we're simply just going to return text posts like that. Super simple. If we go back here now to this and we refresh, you'll see that we have, why is it still showing that? Okay, let me just restart my server because for some reason sometimes this messes up, so we'll just restart it. Okay, and I don't know what was going on there. I had some weird issue, but anyways, I got this now back to the docs page, and you can see we now have /posts. And if I just try this out and execute, you see it just gives me an empty response, okay? That's what we're expecting because currently we don't have any posts. However, if we put a post in here, then we would be able to retrieve it. So that's a good endpoint. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start making some posts. So I'm going to have some ID like 1, okay? And I'm going to have this associated, if I can type properly, with some post. So for my post, I'm going to have another dictionary. I'm going to have title, new post, and content, cool test post. Okay. And now I want to make an endpoint that allows me to retrieve one individual post. So first of all, let's just go back actually, and let's quickly test and go refresh. Okay. And let's try this out and execute. And you can see that we get the one post showing up. But maybe I want to be able to kind of filter and get just an individual post. So I'm going to make a new endpoint. I'm going to say @app.get. And I'm going to type /posts/ and then inside of parentheses, I'm going to type what's known as a path parameter. So this is a dynamic value that we can actually change and adjust in order to get an individual post. So we're doing ID, right? And then what I'm going to do here is say define get_post. And I'm going to say ID is of type int. Now what this is doing is it's going to directly map this ID parameter to the ID value that I have inside of this path parameter inside of curly braces and give it as a parameter to my function so I can use it inside of here. So now what I can do is I can say return text posts, okay, .get, and then I can get ID. Okay, so now what I'm able to do is if I go here and I refresh, we should see that we have another endpoint. You can see it says get post with an ID. We can pass the ID, so let's pass ID of 1. And when we execute this, it's not giving us anything. And I see the problem. That is because ID is a string when it should be a number. So if we change this to a number now, and we go refresh, and then try out, go with 1, and execute, you can see now that we get the individual post rather than a list of all of the posts. Okay. So just showing you, this is how you create what's called a path parameter. Now, if we want to return an error here, if the post doesn't exist, what I need to do is I need to import this HTTP exception. Now, from this function, I can do something like if ID not in text posts, then I can raise an HTTP exception. I can specify a status code, in this case, something like 404, and I can say the detail post not found. When I do that, that's going to indicate, okay, we've had a 404 error, not found, and then post not found, and that's how you can return an error. So now if we go back here and we refresh and we try to access a post with ID like 4 or something and execute, you'll see that it says detail 404, and then it gave us a 404 error code. Okay, so what I just did quickly is I just had ChatGPT generate a bunch of test posts because I'm going to use these throughout the rest of this kind of section here to demo a few more things. All right, so what we've done is we've added a bunch of text posts. We've added what's called a path parameter. We had a normal kind of query endpoint here. And the next thing that I want to do is show you how we can use what's called query parameters inside of our functions. So up until this point, it's been pretty straightforward, right? We just can call /post, we can call for a particular ID. Now I want to make it work so that we can do some kind of more advanced filtering using query parameters, and then we'll continue from there. So I'm actually going to go inside of this function right here, and I'm going to start adding some optional query parameters that we can pass to this that will allow us to kind of filter some of the content. So a query parameter, remember, is the thing that comes after the question mark. So something like maybe, length equals 10 or something, right? Whatever. So that we can actually filter kind of the number of posts maybe that we're receiving. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a query parameter called limit. I'm going to say limit:int is equal to, and by default, it's going to be none. Now, what I've just done is I've just specified that I now have the ability to pass a query parameter called limit to this post endpoint, and I can then check if this query parameter exists. If it does, I can use it. If it doesn't, I don't have to. So my idea with the limit parameter is that maybe I don't want to receive all 10 posts. Maybe I only want to receive the first 3. Well, I can specify that with the limit. So let me show you how this works. I can do something like if limit. Then what I'm going to do is say return text posts up to the limit. Okay, now this is not bulletproof because if the limit is larger than the number of posts, that will give us an error. But for now, that's fine. We'll just use that. And then otherwise, we'll just return the text posts. So now if I go back to my page here and I refresh, you're going to see that if I look at posts, we have the ability to add this limit query parameter. So what I can do is go try it out. For limit, I can pass maybe 3, for example, and then execute. And what? It gave us an error. Okay, that's weird. So the reason we got that error, sorry, is because we're trying to apply a list operation on a dictionary. There's multiple ways we can fix this, but for now, what I'm going to do just to make it easy is I'm going to say list of text posts dot, and this is going to be values like that. So we'll just convert the values into a list and then return them. So let's go back here and let's go refresh. And then we'll go here. You can see we have a limit again. Let's go maybe 5 and execute. And now you see we get a list with 5 items. If we change this to 3, we get only 3 items. And if we don't have any limit at all, and we execute, we get all of the items showing up, okay? So just showing you that's how you add a query parameter. If you want to do that, you simply specify it in the parameters here. You can make it optional, which means you can have something like is equal to none, or you can make it mandatory by removing this, and now you have to pass the query parameter. If you don't, then you could potentially get some errors inside of the function. You can pass multiple parameters, like maybe, content, length or something or whatever, and then you can specify something like int, can make it string. The reason why you need to specify the type here is so that it can be auto-documented and validated by FastAPI. The way the FastAPI works is that it automatically validates all of the data input that's coming into the function and out of the function for you. So when I specify that this is an int, if I try to send something other than an int to this function, it's actually going to raise an error for me, okay, other than a number. So this documentation is actually very, very good inside of FastAPI, and that's why you use what's called a Python type hint inside of the parameters, and you specify like what does the function return, what does it accept, so that it can be really well documented and it can have what's called this data validation. Okay, so at this point we've looked at query parameters, we've looked at path parameters, we've looked at the get endpoint extensively. Now I want to look at the post endpoint and creating new data. So what I'm going to do is type @app.post, and I'm going to do /posts. Okay. Now from here, what I want to do is be able to create a post. So I'm going to make a function called create_post. What we're going to take for creating a post is actually something different than for getting a post. So like I said, in FastAPI, it has automatic data validation, which means it's going to check the data that's being sent into the function to make sure it's accurate. Now, up until this point, we looked at the query parameters and the path parameters, but there's another way that we can send data to our API, and it's by using something called the request body, okay? The body is kind of like more hidden information. It's not directly inside of the URL. It's in the field called body. And the way that we accept that type of data is by creating something called a schema in FastAPI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new file here, and I'm going to call this schemas.py. Okay, now inside of here, what we're going to do is we're going to define the type of data that we want to accept in our various endpoints. So in order to do this, we're going to say import, or we're going to say, sorry, from Pydantic, import the base model, and we're going to define a Python class. So we're going to say class post create, okay? And this is going to inherit from the base model. And then we're going to specify in here the fields that we want to accept essentially for a post. So for a post, we're going to accept a title, and we're going to accept some content. Okay, so we have title and content for our post. Now, the way that this works is that you inherit from this base model, which is kind of this special object in Python that has some special features. And what we're able to do now is use this as a type to kind of receive body data inside of our functions. Again, I know it seems a little bit confusing. This is referred to as something called a schema, very common inside of FastAPI to use this, and it's common that you put it in a separate file called schemas. So from app.py, we're going to say from app.schemas, import, and then we're going to import the schema that we just wrote, which is the post create schema. Okay. Now what we can do is for our create post, we can say post. So let's do this, post colon post create. Now, when we do this, because we're using a Pydantic model, by default, FastAPI knows that we're receiving request body. Okay, so not receiving the query parameter, receiving the body. So now what we can do is we can use this post data directly inside of the function to create a new post. So we can do something like, let's do the following. Okay, we're going to say text posts, and then max of text post.keys plus 1, because we need to find what the next ID essentially should be. And then we're going to say is equal to, and we're not going to do post.dict. What we're going to do is we're going to make a dictionary, and we're going to say the title is post.title, and the content is post.content. Now, because in my schema, I've defined that my title is a string and my content is a string, FastAPI will make sure that these are indeed strings before it allows me to call this function. If they aren't strings, it's actually going to automatically raise an error for me and tell me that I have a bad request, which means when I try to access the title or access the content here, I know that they're going to be valid. So again, FastAPI automatically validates the data that comes into the API based on the types that you set, which is extremely useful. So now we've created this post endpoint. It's just going to create this new post. But what we really should do is we should return the new post that was created. So to do that, actually, let's just do this. We can say post is equal to like this, or maybe just new post is equal to this. And then we can say this is equal to new post, and we can return the new post. So now we have a post endpoint to create a new post. So what we can do is we can save, should automatically reload. So now if we come here and we go try it out and we change this to like, you know, cool post and new post or something, and we go execute, you can see it gives us the data back. And then if we go back to posts, looks like the limit is required this time. So let's go like 12 and execute, and you can see we get the new post and our cool test post is showing up. Awesome. So all of that is working. We now know how to accept request body, right? So this different type of data, and to create data. Now to delete data, it would be pretty straightforward. You go app.delete, and then same thing, and you would kind of continue along these lines. And there's more stuff that you could do related to that. I'm not going to show that this second. We'll show it more when we actually get into kind of the finalized project. All right, so we're almost going to move on to databases, but I just want to cover one or two small more things about FastAPI that you should be aware of. Now, the first is going to be the output type. So when we created the post here, right, we're just returning new post. And if we go back to our kind of documentation here, let's just go to /docs and have a look at it, you'll see that it doesn't show us like what type of data is going to be returned, okay? It gives us kind of an example, but this isn't exactly, you know, what we're looking for. It's not the best documentation in the world. So what we can do to enhance the documentation and actually give us some more validation in our code, which is better, is we can specify the type of data that's going to be returned from these functions. So for example, for my create post, I can actually put this arrow here, and I can specify that I'm going to be returning this post create type. Now that's going to look exactly like this, right? So it's the same schema that we had here. Now if we wanted to return something else, we could do class post return or post response, for example. Can be the same thing, but just so the name makes more sense. And then we can change this to post response. And we can import this from here, post response. So now we're indicating, okay, whatever we're returning from this function is going to be of this type. Now what this is going to do, if I go back to my documentation here and I refresh, is it's now going to indicate to us, if we look here, the type that's actually going to be returned to us. You can see it gives us the value here. Example value is going to have title and content being returned on the successful response because we've specified that type. Now, what it also does is it means we can only return data from this function now that is of this type. If I try to return something else, like just a normal dictionary, if I were to actually execute this endpoint, it would give me an error and say, hey, this doesn't match this schema. There must be some kind of problem. Okay, so it adds a layer of protection for us to make sure that we're only returning what we want to return. And actually, in fact, let me show that to you. If I change this to like an empty dictionary and then I go to my front end, and I refresh here and I just go like try it out and I execute, you'll see it actually gives me an error and it says, hey, you know, missing this data type, we're missing title, we're missing content, which we should have in the response. So we need to go back to new post and then it'll work from now on. Okay, so if we want to type the rest of our data, we can do that as well. So for example, when we're getting a post, we should also say that this will be the post response. And then for getting all of the posts, we're not going to type this one right now because the response types are actually a little bit different, even though it's not intended. Anyways, you get the idea. You can do this, okay, which is another useful thing to do inside of FastAPI. And if you wanted to have like a list of posts, you do something like list, okay, and then post response like that. Awesome. So now that we have that, what I want to do is start connecting us to databases. Because right now you'll notice if I refresh this application, all of a sudden my data is going to disappear. Only the data that I have written inside of my code will stay persistent. Now that's because right now all of our data is just inside of a dictionary that's stored in memory. So when our code refreshes, it all gets cleared and kind of reinitialized with this new dictionary. Now that's not ideal. So what we're going to start setting up is database connection. So we're going to go to our app folder and we're going to make a new file called db.py. Now, inside of all of these Python API libraries, you typically have something called a ORM. An ORM stands for an object relational mapping, and it's something that allows you to prevent writing SQL code or NoSQL queries, and instead to write Python-like code to be able to define data, retrieve data, create data, etc. Okay? Now, the ORM that we're going to use here is something called SQL Alchemy. I believe we already installed it. If we didn't, then we can install it again in a second. But the point is, this will allow us to really easily work with our data. So bear with me here because this is a little bit of code that we do need to set up. Not all of it's going to make 100% sense right now, but I promise it will later on as we keep going. Okay, so let's start with some of our imports. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say from collections.abc import the async generator. We're then going to say import UUID, which is something we can use to generate a unique identifier. We're then going to say from SQL Alchemy import create engine. We're then going to say from SQL Alchemy, okay, and this is not what I want. We're going to say import the column. So let's spell column correctly. We're going to import string. We're going to import text, date time, and foreign key, which we'll use later on. And did I spell foreign correctly? No, I did not. So let's spell foreign key correctly. Okay. We're then going to say from SQL Alchemy. Okay, this is going to be .dialects. Let's spell that correctly. .PostgreSQL import UUID. We're then going to say from SQL Alchemy.ext.asyncio import the async session and the async session maker, as well as the create async engine. So let's bring in the async underscore session maker. Again, I know this stuff seems confusing. It's just a little bit of setup and then you never need to do it again. And then we're going to bring in from SQL alchemy.orm, import the declarative base, but this is actually going to be a little bit different. It's going to be declarative base like that, and the relationship. Okay. Now, by the way, all of this stuff I do not have memorized. You don't need to memorize it. It's simply something that we need to be able to set up the database. Once the database is set up, then it's a lot easier for us to work with this. So what we're going to do is we're going to define a variable, and we're going to say the database URL is equal to SQLite, okay, so SQLite plus AIO SQLite, okay, colon 3 dot slash test.db. Now what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to connect to a local database file on our own computer called test.db, which is in the current directory. And sorry, this needs to be a plus here, so let's fix that. That we want to use SQLite plus AIO SQLite, which is essentially an asynchronous version of SQLite, which is a really simple database that we can run locally. Later, if you wanted to connect to a production database, you simply need to change this URL to a URL string for like a remote database or a different type of database, and then everything in your code would stay exactly the same. You would just work in a different database. Now, what we're about to do here is we're going to define what's called our data models, and then we're going to create the database, which will automatically create the data models for us. Now, essentially the data models is the type of data that we want to store. And if you've ever worked with databases before, you'll know that when you want to store data, you need to specify the structure of that data, at least when you're working with a SQL database, which is what we're doing right here. So we need to specify like, okay, what do we want to store for a post, for example? Well, we need to know the user that posted it. We have to have an ID. We want to know maybe the caption of the post, the URL of the file. That's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about here, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to create the data model for storing a post. We're going to make it a little bit more complex now, and we're going to start working towards actually being able to store videos and photos for our API. So what we're going to do is we're going to say class post, and this is going to inherit from the declarative base. Now this is important. You need to inherit from the declarative base so that it knows that we are making this a data model, and this is something that we're going to store in our database, okay? Now we need to specify the table name. So we're going to say underscore underscore table name underscore underscore is equal to post, for example. And then we're going to start specifying all of the fields that we want to have, or all of the columns that we want to have in our data model. So we're going to say ID is equal to column, and then we're going to type UUID. We're going to say as underscore UUID is equal to true. We're going to say primary key is equal to true, and we're going to say the default is UUID.UUID4. And let me just fix the spelling here. Okay, now let me quickly explain what we're doing here. Essentially, what we're saying is we want to have this ID column. Now, for every single entity that you have in a database, you need to have some ID. Now, the ID is typically what's referred to as the primary key. The primary key is something that must be unique. So in this case, every ID that we have needs to be unique. That's why we've marked it as primary key. And because we've specified this UUID thing, what this means is that we're automatically going to generate a random unique ID for it every time we insert one into the database. So every time we create a new post, a new ID will randomly be generated that is guaranteed to be unique, which is the primary key, or the way that we will look up this entity. Okay. Now the next thing that we're going to have is we're going to have a caption. The caption is going to be some column, and this is going to be text. Now you'll notice that the way that we specify the data that we want to have is we say, okay, we're going to have some names, some field names like caption ID. We say it's going to be a column if we're storing data. If we're storing a relationship, we would set it to a relationship or a foreign key or something different. And then you specify what you want in that column. In this case, I want to store text, right? So I say, okay, caption, it's going to be text. Then I'm going to have a URL. This is going to be the URL for the, photo or video. And this is going to be column of string. And we're going to say nullable is equal to false, which means this can't be null. It has to have a value. We're then going to say the file type is equal to column. Same thing, string, nullable is false. We're then going to have the file underscore name. It'll be the exact same thing. So string, nullable equals false. We'll then have a created at, and we'll say column date time. And rather than nullable, we're just going to say default is equal to date time dot UTC now. And then we're going to import date time. So we're going to import date time like that. Not now, import date time like that. And now this should work. Okay. So that's all that we need for the post. Later, we will adjust this slightly to link it to an individual user. But for now, because we don't have users in our app, we're just going to have kind of a simple post. So the way that this will work now is that whenever we want to create a post, we'll need to pass a caption, URL, file type, file name, and created at, or actually created at will be automatically created for us. And then we'll be able to make this new post and store it in our database. If we had other data models, we would define them inside of here or in other files and import them inside. But for now, this is how we're going to do it. So next we need to actually create the database. So we're going to say our engine is equal to this create async engine with database URL. We're then going to say the async underscore session underscore maker is equal to the async session maker, and we're going to pass our engine, and then we're going to say expire on commit is equal to false. Don't worry too much about that. Essentially, what we need to do right now is we need to create this database engine, which can look at all of these models and automatically create the database for us. We're then going to say async define create db underscore and underscore tables. What this is going to do is create the database for us as well as create the tables. So we're going to say async with engine.begin. Okay, and then this is going to be as connection. And what we're going to do is say await con, okay, the connection. So dot run underscore sync. And then we are going to say the declarative base, okay, dot metadata dot create all. Now what this is going to do is it's going to find all of the classes that inherit from the declarative base, and it's going to create them inside of the database. That's all that it's doing. We're then going to have another function. We're going to say async define get underscore async underscore session. Okay, this is going to return an async generator with an async session and none. And then we're going to say async with, and I know this is confusing, bear with me. We're going to say the async session maker as session, and we're going to yield the session. Okay. Again, bear with me. This is actually almost done at this point. What we're doing is we're creating all the databases and the tables, right? What this does is it starts the database engine, and then it creates all the tables and creates the database. Then we have this get async session. What this is going to do is it is going to get a session which will allow us to actually access the database and write and read from it asynchronously. Okay, so we're doing this using async. If you don't understand async in Python, don't worry too much about it. I will explain the kind of important stuff later. So that's all we need from this particular file. Later, we will add a few other things to store our users for the application, but for now, this is fine. Okay, so there we go. We've now written the database stuff. What we're going to do now is we're going to go into our app.py file, and we're going to start importing some of the things that we need so we can actually use the database. So we're going to say from app.db, import the post, the create db and tables, and the get async session. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to set something up so that as soon as the application runs, we create the database automatically if it's not already created. Now, in order to do that, again, this is going to look a little bit complex. Don't worry, you just set it up once and then you're good. We're going to say from sqlalchemy.ext.asyncio, and then we're going to import the async session. Then we also need to import something called the async context manager. So we're going to say from context lib, this is built into Python, import the async context manager. We're then going to say at async context manager, and we're going to say async define lifespan. We're going to take in our app, which is an instance of FastAPI. And what we're going to do is we're going to say await, and we're going to say create db and tables, and then we're going to yield. Don't worry too much about this. It's kind of advanced Python syntax, so you don't really need to understand. And then all we're going to do here is when we say app is equal to FastAPI, we're going to say lifespan is equal to lifespan. What this is going to do is it's going to automatically run this function as soon as the app is started. It's going to create the database and the tables for us and just make sure that this is essentially handled correctly and cleanly exit when the application stops. Now, these other imports we'll use later on. For now, we'll just leave them in. Okay, so now if we just want to do kind of a sample test here, we can shut down our server and rerun it, and it should automatically create the database for us. However, it's giving me an issue saying datetime.utc isn't a function. Let me quickly fix that. So we have to actually change this to say from datetime import datetime. So just change that import here in the DB file. And now if you come back here and we shut this down and we restart it, and we got another error. Let me quickly fix that. Okay, so another silly error here. We're going to go inside of our db.py file. What we're going to do quickly is say class base, and this is going to inherit from the declarative base, and then we're just going to say pass, and we're just going to change all instances of declarative base down here to say base. Kind of a silly error, again, a little bit complex, and then same thing when we go here, just change this to say base, and that should fix the problem for us. Essentially, we just cannot directly inherit from declarative base. We need to do this kind of other base class first, a little bit weird, but that will allow us to set up the database. I know the database setup seems a little bit confusing, but once it's set up again, you don't need to change it. So let me just shut this down and then restart it. Okay, so the server is running, we didn't get any errors, and the way we can test if this is working is if this test.db file was created It looks like it was for me, which means the database connection is set. And now we don't really need to touch much in this database file, and we can just start using the database to actually create new posts. So in fact, let's start doing that. Let's actually scrap pretty much everything that we have so far. I know it seems like, why did we get rid of it? But trust me, we're just gonna write this in a better way now. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna start writing the endpoints for uploading or creating a new post and doing the image and video upload. So as I mentioned, we're gonna start doing the file upload. Now to do that, we're gonna have to import a few more things. And again, just bear with me. I'm gonna explain it step by step as we go through that. And then we'll start adding the users, a bunch of other stuff as well. So what we're gonna do is from our FastAPI import at the top, actually, we're gonna import file. We're gonna import upload file, the, form, and the depends. Okay. Now we're gonna make a new endpoint, and we're gonna say @app dot, and this is gonna be post because we're gonna be uploading a file, and this is gonna be /upload. Now this is gonna be to essentially make a new post. So when we make a new post, we're gonna upload either a video or a photo, and then some caption for that video or photo, and then it will be posted. So in order to do this, we're gonna say async define upload file. We're using async because we're gonna have some async operations in here where we essentially wait for something to occur. FastAPI is asynchronous by default, so you can always use the async keyword for these functions. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna say file, and this is gonna be upload file is equal to file with 3 dots inside. What this means is that we're gonna be able to receive a file object to this endpoint, okay? We're then gonna say the caption is a string, which is equal to some form data. So rather than actually just accepting a request body, we're going to accept something called the request form. There's different types of data you can send to the endpoint. For example, you can send a file, you can send a form, you can send a request body, you can send query parameters. This is just another type. So we're going to accept the caption from some form data, okay? We're then going to say our session is an async session, which is equal to depends, and this is going to be get async session. Now, this is going to look a little bit weird, but in FastAPI, we have something called dependency injection. This is essentially a dependency injection. It'll light up in a second here when we start using it, where what's going to happen is we're automatically going to get the asynchronous session by calling this function and pass it as the variable session inside of this function. This is how it works when you want to essentially trigger another function to run as a dependency for this function. So we're saying we want to get the asynchronous session for our database so we can use the database inside of this function. In order to use it in this function, that's how you do it. You write this kind of dependency injection where you say this function depends on this right here. It will run the function, it will get the database object, it will pass it to us, and then we'll be able to use it directly inside of here. Okay. So now inside of here, what we're going to do is we're going to take the file and we're going to upload it. That's going to take us a second to be able to do because we need to use ImageKit. So before I do that, I'm going to show you how we can create a new post with some kind of fake post data, and then how we can do actually the upload for that. So to make a new post, we can say post is equal to post, and we can specify things like the caption is equal to the caption. We can say the URL is equal to dummy URL, and later we'll fill that in. We can say the file, what is this? File underscore type is equal to, for now, we can just go photo. Then we can do a comma, and we can say the file underscore name is equal to dummy name. Okay, so let's go dummy URL, dummy name. Again, there's a few other things we can add later, but for now, this is fine. Now, in order for us to actually add this to the database, the way that we do that is we say session dot add, okay? And we simply add this post here that we created. Then we say await session dot commit. So the way that you add something is you create a new post or create a new object of whatever it is that you want to create. You add this to the database session, and then you commit the session. It's important that you commit this because committing it will actually save it. Adding it to the session is like staging it, saying, hey, this is ready to be added, but it won't actually fully be written into the database unless you commit the session. Now, another thing you can do after this is you can say await session.refresh, and you can refresh a particular object. And what this will do now is it will go and look in the database and populate any entries here that were automatically created when it was added to the database. So for example, we have this created at and this ID. When we specify the post, we didn't specify an ID or a created at. That gets automatically created when we commit this in the session. So when we refresh the post, it essentially gets hydrated with that extra data where we now get the ID and the created at as a part of this post, which we can now return to our user. So what we could do here is we can just say return, and then we can return the post. We don't need to do that, but we can if we want, right? So we can say return post, and then we will get that data. So we can test this, but before we're going to know if it was actually added to the database, we need to write an endpoint that's going to allow us to view the different posts. So we're going to say @app.get, and we're going to call this the feed. So we're going to say /feed. We're then going to say async define get underscore feed. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say the session. This is an async session is equal to depends on get async session. Now, the reason we're doing that is because we need to access the database here in order to get all of our posts. So we need to bring this in as the dependency injection. Now, quickly, I do need to import something. So I'm going to say from SQL Alchemy import select, because this is going to allow us to select different posts. So now what we're going to do is we're going to say result is equal to await session. This is our database dot execute. Okay, and this is how you can execute a query. And we're going to say select, and we want to select on the post, object or post kind of table. And we want to say order underscore by, and we're going to say post dot, okay, like this, created underscore at dot descending. Okay, so querying here is a little bit weird, but what we're able to do is say, okay, I want to select posts, right? So I want to start looking through posts. And then you can add these various filters, like I want to order it by all of the posts that are created at and the descending, right? So I want to go in the order in which they were created. Then I could also do something like, dot filter, right? Or like all these other things, and you can filter by specific criteria. I'm not going to go through all of it, but essentially if you just look up like SQL Alchemy FastAPI online, you'll see all of the different ways that you can query different data. If you want to just get all of the posts and you don't care about doing any kind of filtering, you can just say select post. That will give all of them to you, okay? And then if you want to check various fields or relationships, you can do that. We'll look at that a little bit later on. Okay, so now we have our result. This is going to be all of our posts. Now what we're going to do is say posts is equal to, and we're just going to go row, 0 for row in result.all. Now, what the result.all is going to do is just give us all of the results from this particular query. The reason why we're doing this is because I want to convert this into a list. Essentially, we need to step through all of the results and take them and pass them into this in order for us to actually access them all at once. It's due to the way that FastAPI returns the results here. It returns it in what's called a cursor object, where you're stepping through the database. So what I'm doing is I'm looping through all of the values and then just pulling them into individual values that I store inside of here. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say my posts underscore data is equal to a list, and I'm going to say for post in posts, and I'm going to start creating kind of a more comprehensive post object that I can return to my front end that's going to include some data that we need about our posts. So we're going to say post data dot append, okay, and then inside of here we're going to have an object. For the object, we're going to say ID is equal to a string of the post.id. So I'm going to convert it from a UUID object to a string. I'm then going to say the caption is the post.caption. I'm going to say the URL, if we can spell this correctly, is the post.url. I'm going to say the file underscore type is the post.file type. And then I'm going to say the file underscore name is the post.file name. And I'm going to say created at is the post.createdAt.iso format, which is going to give me a timestamp in a format I can actually read. Then I'm simply going to go down here and I'm going to say return posts, and I'm just going to return all of my post data. Okay, and that should be post data like that. So that is going to complete this kind of get feed function, which will give me all of my posts. This should allow me to create a post when I upload a file. Again, for now, the file we haven't specified, but we'll do that in a second. So now let's give it a test and see if this works. So let's rerun our backend. I'm just going to shut this down and restart it. Let's go here. Let's refresh. We see we have an upload and see it says multi-part form data. So I'm going to try it out, and now it allows me to choose a file. So let me pick some file here. Okay, so I just uploaded some files, some payslips from a while ago. Let's go caption hello world, and let's execute, and let's see what we get. And it gives us the response body. Okay, photo, dummy URL, date, hello world, and the ID. So now if we want to see if it's actually in the feed, what we can do is go to get feed, try it out, and execute, and you can see that we get the post. I think I pressed this twice, so we get 2 posts showing up here, but it's reading those from the database. And the important thing is that if I were to shut this application down and restart it, these would still be in the database because, well, they're here persistently, right? And they're stored in this file. If we want to delete them, we can just delete this database. Okay, so now we have the ability to upload or create a new post and to kind of view the post. Now we need to start actually handling the image and video upload. And to do that, we're going to use ImageKit. So what we're going to do is make a new file here, and we're going to call this ImageKit, or not ImageKit, images.py. Okay, so from here, we're going to go images.py, and we're going to start importing a few things. We're going to say from.env import load.env. We're going to say from ImageKit, okay, IO, import, if we can spell this, ImageKit. And remember, we imported this or installed this at the beginning. We're going to import OS, and then we're just going to call this load.env function. We're then going to say ImageKit is equal to ImageKit, and we are going to essentially specify all of the variables that we defined here in our .env file. So to do this, we're actually just going to use this autocomplete. We're going to say our private key is equal to os.getEnv ImageKit private key, public key os.getEnv public key, URL endpoint os.getEnv ImageKit URL endpoint. Okay, so the same variables that we have here. And actually, let's just make sure they're spelled correctly because this one is a little bit different. So let's fix this to just be ImageKit URL. Okay, now what are we doing here? Well, this load.env function will look for the presence of this .env variable and essentially load it for us. Okay, so we'll load these values in so we can now access them. Now to access those variables, we use this os.getEnv function, which will be able to find the presence of these environment variables and load them into our code. Very important that we're doing this on the back end, not on the front end. And I want to explain to you how we now kind of upload content using ImageKit, which is what we're about to do. So let's go into app.py and let's import ImageKit so that we can start using it. So what we're going to do is say from app.images import, and we're going to import ImageKit. And then we're going to say from, and this is going to be ImageKit io.models.upload file request options, import the upload file request options, because we're going to use this in a second to specify how we upload the file. Now, before I start kind of diving into the code here, I want to go to the ImageKit documentation and start kind of explaining to you how this works. All right, so if you remember at the beginning of the video, we would have created an ImageKit account. The account looks something like this, where you have this dashboard. Now, ImageKit can automatically host all of the images for us, and it can handle uploading, deleting them, cropping them, modifying them, and more importantly, just being our storage, so we don't need to worry about storing images and videos, which can be a huge pain. Now, you do have the ability with ImageKit to connect this to external storage. So for example, if you go to external storage here, you can add a new one and you can connect it to like an S3 bucket if you're familiar with what that is, or other locations where you can essentially have ImageKit managing this external bucket. You don't need to do that, but you can. In our case, we're going to use ImageKit as our DAM, so it's automatically going to handle all of the asset management for us. Eventually, when we start uploading stuff, we'll see in our media library that it will show up here. We'll be able to click into the various files. We can view them here. We can view the information. We can edit the tags, get embeds, URLs, all of this kind of stuff. Just makes it very easy to manage the images. Now, in terms of using ImageKit, what we can do is use a single API. Funny enough, we're building an API, and we're going to use an ImageKit API to upload the images. Once the images are uploaded, we can then just change some query parameters in the URL for the image, and we can specify the width, the height, if we want to add text on top of it, if we want it black or white, if we want to crop it, whatever. As you can kind of see, it's showing you right here, which makes this extremely useful. It also has performance optimization, a lot of other features, but let's go into the docs. So I'm going to go docs like this. Let's go to the Python documentation. You can see it supports a ton of different frameworks. I'm going to explain to you how we upload it. Now, you can use this with a lot, as you can see, JavaScript, React, Angular, all of this kind of stuff. In our case, we're doing this from Python. And so because we're doing that, we imported or we installed the ImageKit IO library, and then we initialized it like this. Now, we're going to be doing what's called a backend or server upload. So essentially, the user is going to send some image to our backend, and then our backend is going to upload this to ImageKit. Now, it's important that we do it this way so that we can securely control what images we upload or which ones we don't and have them stored on our server. Whereas if you were to upload this directly from a front end or a client like a JavaScript application or something, that's not as secure, okay? And you don't have as much control because you're essentially exposing different tokens for ImageKit on your front end, which you may not want to do. So it shows us right here some kind of code snippets of how you can do the upload. You have some URL to an image. In our case, it's going to be some data, which I'll show you. And we can do imagekit.upload file, pass the different piece of information, and then it just gets uploaded. And it's going to return to us essentially an object that looks like this, where we have the URL for the image, the name, tags, all of this kind of stuff that we can then use and store. Okay, and then if we want to generate a URL, we can do something like this. Again, we're not going to talk too much about everything here, but that's kind of how we do the upload. Hopefully this makes a little bit of sense, but the point is user will send a file to our API. Our API will then upload it to ImageKit. We'll grab the URL, save that in our database, and then serve that to our user on the front end. All right, so we're going to go and we're going to import a few other things that we're going to need to perform this upload. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say import sh util. I'm going to import OS. I'm going to import UUID, and I'm going to import temp file. Now, the process is going to be that when the user sends us this file, we're going to create a temporary file, which is a copy of this file. We're then going to upload that copy and then essentially remove or delete that copy from the machine because we'll no longer need it. So what we're going to do is create a variable, and we're going to say our temp file path is equal to none. We're then going to say in a try block with, okay, temp file dot named temporary file, we're going to say delete is equal to false, and we're going to say the suffix is equal to os.path.split text, and we're going to say this is going to be file.file name, and then this is going to be at index 1. Okay, this is a little bit weird. Again, just bear with me here. We're going to say this is as temp file, and we're going to say this is as temp file. What this is going to do is essentially make a named temporary file that ends in whatever the file name is that was uploaded here. Then inside of here, since we have this temporary file, we're going to say the temp file path is equal to the temp file dot name, and we're going to say sh util dot copy file object, and this is going to be file dot file, and then the temporary file. And let me just correct myself here. What we're doing is when we create this temporary file object, we're using or we're having the end of the temporary file have the same extension as the file that was uploaded here. So if they upload a JPEG, for example, we create a temporary JPEG. If they upload a MP4, we create a temporary MP4. Okay, so what we do is we create the temporary file, we then copy the contents of this file into the temporary file, and then that kind of completes this with statement. Then we're going to start doing the upload. So we're going to say our upload result is equal to ImageKit.upload underscore file. What we're going to do is we're going to say file is equal to, and we're going to open the temporary file path in this RB mode, which stands for read bytes. We're then going to say our file name is equal to file.filename, and we're going to say the options is equal to, and this is going to be the upload file request options. And in here, we're going to say use underscore unique file name. This is going to be equal to true. And we're going to say the tags is equal to, and inside of a list, we're going to say backend upload. So we know that we uploaded this from our API. Now, this is all we need. Like, that's literally how easy it is to use ImageKit. We just write this one line where we essentially open the file, we upload it to ImageKit, and then it's going to give us a result that contains all of the metadata that we need. So we're going to say if upload result dot, this is going to be response dot http underscore status underscore code is equal to 200, that means that this was successful, then what we're going to do is all of this, where we essentially create the post. Okay, now I just need to structure this a little bit better because it's a bit difficult to read, but we have this try block, right? So I'm just going to put an except block here. So we're going to say except exception as E, and then we can put a pass right here for now. And then we're going to say finally, and in the finally block, we're just going to make sure we clean up the temporary file. So we're going to say if temp file path, okay, and os.path.exists, the temp file path. Then we're just going to say os.unlink, and we're going to unlink the temporary file path. And then we're going to say file.file.close. Okay, so this is just going to clean up our file objects. So at the end of this function, we're all good and everything's cleaned up. Okay, and then for the exception, let's just quickly handle this. We're just going to say raise HTTP exception status code 500, and we'll just put whatever the string error was so that we're able to have a look at it. Okay, so now at least the try except block is done, and we just need to handle this part. So what we're saying is, all right, we've now created the temporary file, we've uploaded it, we're going to check the response, and we're going to make sure that this was successful. Now, if it was successful, what we're going to do is we're going to create this post, but for the URL this time, we're going to change it to be the upload result dot URL. For the file type, we're going to say this is video if file.content_type.starts with video / otherwise, we're going to put the type as image. And for the file name, this is simply going to be the upload result, okay, dot, and this is name. So now we're actually using the content from ImageKit, and we will have the URL for the image. Hopefully that makes sense, but that's pretty much what we need to do for the upload. And I think that should actually be good. So what we'll do now is let's open our terminal again. Let's just restart this, and let's go back here, and let's test this from our docs. Okay, so let's go upload. All right, we're going to go try it out. We're going to put a file. So we need to upload an image. So let me just upload one of these images here. Let's go hello world, and let's send this. And it says module NT path has no attribute split text. Okay, so I need to remove one of the T's here. So it's split text in one word. So that was my problem there. Let's go back and refresh and just try this again. So we're going to go try it out. Upload again, just upload an image or a video. It needs to be some media. Say hello, and then execute this. It's going to take a second because it does need to do the upload. And then we got some issues saying none time object has no attribute HTTP status code. So we probably just spelt something wrong. So let's go here and fix this. Yeah, so we have upload result. This needs to be .response_metadata. Okay, so let's spell metadata correctly. And now let's test it again. Apologies, guys. This is just a part of programming. Refresh. Try it out. Choose a file, again, some media, okay, hello world, and let's see, and here we go, we get the response body, and now what I want to check is the URL. So it has a URL here, so let's copy this, and let's paste this in our browser, and we should see that we get the image now, and it is uploaded. And importantly, if we go to the media library, we should be able to refresh here, and we should see that now the images appear, happening twice because we uploaded it twice, even though we got an error the last time. And you can see this shows up. And by the way, this is Kenny, one of my co-founders from DevLaunch, and someone that we were filming a testimonial video with. Anyways, that's kind of the random image that you guys are seeing. Okay, so it's working. We can see it's uploaded here in ImageKit. It's working now from the back end. What I want to do next now is test out this feed endpoint and see if this gives me all of the content. So let's execute, and you can see there we go. So we have this new post, right? We have the ImageKit URL, and now I just want to talk about kind of the advantage of using ImageKit and what we can do with these URLs that is super cool, which I'm going to show you in 1 second. So I'm going to grab one of these URLs, which I would recommend that you do. I'm going to show you how we can modify it by literally just changing some parameters in this URL. Okay, so I have the URL in this one tab here. And then I also just pulled up the ImageKit documentation. And what you're able to see, let me just make this a little bit bigger, is that we can have these transformation parameters directly in the URL to modify the image. So notice I have, ImageKit demo, and then we can do these transformations of like the width and the height directly on this URL. Let me show you, and then I'm going to show you a bunch of other ones that we can do. So what we do is we go in between the file name and the, project ID for ImageKit. And we just put this in directly. And when we do that, you see that I just modified the width and the height directly by cropping it by literally just putting those parameters. If I put like 500, see now that it goes up. If I put width of like, I don't know, what is this? 700, see now we get an image that looks a little bit more complete, right? And we can just add it directly like that. Now we also can pass this as a query parameter if that's easier for us to do. And you can see it shows some examples of kind of resizing the image. Now, if we go here to image transformations, you'll see there's just so many that we can do here, right? Like we have an AI transformation, which is currently in beta, which is kind of cool. We can add overlays directly on top of the image. So we can have like some local image we want to put on top of this image and directly embed it. We can do effects and enhancements, sorry. So we can have like E-contrast. So let's actually copy this and see if we can get it. So we'll do TR and then H-300 E contrast. Okay, and make sure there's no space. And then if we run that, you can see that it gives us some more contrast. We can sharpen it. So if we want to pass E sharpen, let's change that to E-sharpen. And you can see it now sharpens the image a little bit. It's a little bit difficult to see probably with my screen recording software, but it is doing that. And then we have video transformations. These are cool because we can have, for example, like thumbnails for videos. So if we upload a video, we can try to get a thumbnail from a specific portion of it. So for example, we can use this ikthumbnail.jpg. If we just put that at the end of the path, it'll just give us the first frame as a thumbnail. We can get a thumbnail from a specific time 5. So we're doing like 5 seconds in. That's how we're getting the thumbnail. We can do transformations on the thumbnails. We can trim the videos, so we only get a certain amount of length from it. And then of course, the most important thing in my opinion is the optimization. So you can do image optimization, so you can automatically compress the images without losing quality and load them significantly faster. You also can do video optimization, and there's like so many different things. So if you do care a lot about image and video, definitely check out these docs that I will leave in the description. And one with video specifically is like changing the quality of the video so you're not loading, massive 4K videos or something. And even if you set it to like 90% of the quality, it's, 3 times smaller, which is significant. So anyways, that's the images. They are, working. Now I want to continue with the API. So we have the ability to kind of get a feed, to upload a file. Now let's write the ability to delete a post. And then what I want to do is move on and talk about authentication. So we actually have different users kind of signing in, and only the user who made a post can delete a post. And like you need to be signed in to be able to make a post. That's pretty important, right? So let's make another endpoint here. Let's call this @app.delete. For deleting, we're going to take in /posts, and this is going to be a path parameter of our post_ID. What we're then going to do is say async define delete _post. We're then going to say post_ID, and this is going to be a string. We're then going to say the session is async session, and that depends on the get async session. We're then going to have a try. For the try, we're going to say the post_UUID is equal to UUID.UUID, and then this is going to be the post_ID. We're then going to say result is equal to await session dot execute, and we're going to say select post dot where, okay, and we're going to say where the post dot ID is equal, just 2 equals, to the post_UUID. Now the reason why we need to convert the post ID to a UUID is because this will be a string by default, and we need it to be this UUID object, so when we do the comparison, they match. Okay, so then after this, we're going to say the post is equal to result, and we're going to say dot scalars, okay, with a set of parentheses, and then dot first. What this is going to do is just return the exact result rather than giving us this kind of object that we need to loop through. So that's what scalars does, even though I know it sounds a little bit confusing. We're going to say if we do not have any post, then we're going to raise an HTTP exception, and we're going to say the post was not found with status code 404. Okay, and then otherwise, what we're going to do is just delete the post. So we're going to say await session.delete post, and then we're going to say await session.commit like that. And when we commit this, it will delete the post. We're then going to return, and we'll just say success is true, and then we can have some message like post deleted successfully. And then we're just going to have an except in case there's an error. So we'll say except exception as E, And then what we're going to do is just raise an HTTP exception saying, hey, there was some error. This is the error. Okay. And that should be all that we need to do for deleting a post. So we can save that and let's now give it a test. So let's go to here. Let's grab a post ID. So maybe one of these old ones, and let's refresh. And let's go to posts. Let's pass in the post ID and execute this. And it said 404 post not found. Okay, so that's maybe an issue. Let's go feed and let's try to get the post. And okay, it looks like it did delete that post maybe because it said 404, but then it deleted it. So let's copy this. Let's paste the other one and let's do it. And there we go. Okay, now it says success true. Post deleted successfully. Okay, so that looks like it's working. And then if we go back to the feed, we can execute. And now we only have one post inside of here, which is a valid post. Cool. So deleting is working, upload is working, getting is working. Now what I want to do is I want to start handling the user authentication. This is all great, but it only kind of matters if we can like sign in. And for example, if I make a post, you shouldn't be able to delete it, right? We have to have kind of rules and authentication and that kind of flow for our endpoint. So let's go ahead and start doing that. To do that, I'm going to go over to app.py. I'm going to make a new file, call this users.py. Now, this is where we're quickly going to talk about JWT tokens. So let me hop over to the kind of, whiteboard and explain that to you. Okay, so we're going to talk about authentication, right? This is arguably the most complicated part of most web applications. And for this app, we're going to use something called JWT tokens or JWT auth. JWT stands for JSON Web Tokens. They are a very common format for web authentication. And the way that they work is that they essentially validate or authenticate a user by the user including this token in all of the requests that they send to the server. So this little diagram that I have for you explains it. Let's go through it. So essentially the way this works is you have some user, let's call her Sally, right? And she logs into the application. Now, before she can log in, she needs to make an account. But to make an account, you don't need to do anything fancy. So let's imagine, she makes some account. She has some credentials, okay? Now she signs in to the server. The way that she does that, right, is she goes from her computer, so she's on some website, and she sends her login details to this auth endpoint. So maybe that's her username and her password, right? Now, this is our API, or kind of our server, and what it does is it checks the user credentials, and it says, okay, are these valid or are they invalid? They should be valid. So when they're valid, what's going to happen is it's going to generate a signed JWT token. Now, this is a special token that just looks like a random string of characters that essentially identifies Sally. It tells us, okay, this token belongs to Sally. So if I see this token, it means that Sally is the one who sent this request. That's effectively what that means. Sally signs in. She then gets some token back. And this token is Sally's token. Anyone that has this token is Sally in the eyes of our API, okay? So what Sally does is she now stores this token, or really her computer stores it in the browser. She's not going to do it manually. And now for the rest of all of the requests that she uses with our API, she sends this token along with the request. So she has the request plus this JWT token. We verify the token is correct. And then we say, okay, who is this? Oh, it's Sally. Okay, great. So it's Sally. So we can now go do this thing because Sally's allowed to do that thing. That's essentially how this works. This is an oversimplified explanation. The point is, user signs in, they get some token, they store this token, they then send that with every request as they kind of hit our API and start interacting with it, and that identifies them to us as that user, and there you go, right? That's how it works. Okay, so that's what we're going to implement. Now to do that, we're going to use something called FastAPI Users, which is a module that we installed that just makes this process a lot easier. So in our users file, we're going to say import UUID. We're then going to say from typing, import optional. And we have a lot of other stuff to import as well. We're going to say from FastAPI, import depends and request. And then what we're going to do is say from FastAPI underscore users, import the base user manager, the FastAPI users, and the UUID ID mixin, as well as models. Okay, now this is giving us an error because I need to make this FastAPI users plural, and now we're good. Then we're going to say from fast underscore API or FastAPI underscore users.authentication. Okay, and we're going to import the authentication backend. If we can spell this correctly. We're also going to import the bearer transport as well as the JWT strategy. Now with this, you can use various types of token strategies. In this case, we're going to use JWT. Don't worry, there's some other ones as well, but we're not going to look at those right now. We're then going to say from FastAPI underscore users.database, import the SQL Alchemy user database. And we're going to say from app.db, import user and get user DB, which are two functions that we're going to go and write now. Okay, so because we're now going to have users in our app, we are going to have to make some changes. So we're going to go to database.py, and we're going to start writing a user model that we can essentially use to store users. Okay, so to do this, we're going to say from FastAPI underscore users.db, import the SQL Alchemy, and this is user database. Also going to import the SQL Alchemy user table UUID. Okay, this is complicated. It sounds crazy long, but these are just what we need to import. And then what we're going to do is beneath the base, we're going to say class user, and this is going to inherit from the SQL Alchemy base user table UUID and base. We're then going to say relationship, okay, and this is going to be post, and then we're going to say this back populates the user. Essentially what we're doing here is we're creating this table, this user table, so that we can have a relationship between our posts and between our users. We want to know what post was created by what user and what posts exist for what user. So we're going to say posts is equal to this, and now on this user we'll be able to find all of their posts. Okay, so that's why we're saying back populates user. So what I'm going to do now on this post database model is I'm going to create the relationship content to the user so that from a post we know what user posted it or what user created it, and from a user we know what post that they have. So on my post, I'm going to do this. I'm going to say my user ID is equal to column, and then this is going to be what if we want here, UUID. We're going to say as UUID is true. We're going to say foreign key, and this is going to be user.id, and we're going to say nullable equal to false. Okay, now a foreign key is essentially a reference to another table. So in our case, what we're saying is for this post, we want to have a foreign key which references the ID of a user. That's what we're doing. So we know the user ID that posted this post, that made this post. Now, as well as that, we're going to create a relationship, and we're going to say user is equal to relationship, and then we're going to have user, and we're going to say back populates posts. Now, these relationships automatically link these objects together and allow us to use the .post and the .user attribute on both post and user, and the foreign key allows us to have this link so that we know the user's ID. Now, what we've created here is what's known as a one-to-many relationship, where one user can have many posts. There's different types of relationships that we can define in our database models. This is not a SQL course, so I'm not going to get into that too in depth, but the relationships to be aware of are one-to-many, many-to-one, and one-to-one. Most frequently, you are using one-to-many, which means you have one user with many potential posts, right? Now, if we wanted to flip the relationship around where one post had many users, for example, we would simply change the foreign key to exist on the user table rather than on the post table. So typically the child, so in this case, like one user has many posts, so the post would be considered a kind of a child of the user in terms of the relationship hierarchy, is the one that contains the foreign key. Again, this is something you need to look at more if you're designing databases. And again, this is not a SQL course. The point is we need to make this relationship so now users are linked to posts. Now that we have that, we've created the user, it's inheriting from base as well as from SQL Alchemy. We can go back to users and we can start using this. And actually, sorry, there's one more function I forgot I need to write here. So let's go down to the bottom and we're going to say async define get underscore user underscore DB. We're going to say session, and this is going to be the async session equals depends. Okay, and let's spell depends correctly. And depends is a capital, of course. So we're going to say depends on get async session. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to say yield SQL Alchemy user database session and user. Now, why is this giving me an error? I guess I didn't import it. So let's go from FastAPI. So from FastAPI import depends with a capital D, and I think that should be good now. Essentially what we're doing is we're just writing a function that's going to get us the user database table. So that's effectively what this is doing. Again, don't worry too much about it. The database stuff is a little bit confusing. The point is it will just give us the database table that's associated with the users, which we're going to have to use here now inside of this users.py file. Okay, so from here, we're going to create some variable called secret. This should be equal to some random string. You can actually generate this with a specific function on your computer. Point is, you don't want to share this secret string because this is actually what's used to sign your JWT tokens, which identifies them as unique to this particular app. If someone were to have access to the secret key, they would be able to decode your JWT tokens, which you don't want. So this is something that you want to keep secret, hence the name secret. In my case, I'm just making it something random. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say class user manager. And this is going to be UUID ID mixin. So we're going to inherit from that. We're also going to inherit from the base user manager. And then we're going to have the user and the UUID dot UUID. Okay. Again, I know some of this stuff seems confusing. This is directly out of the FastAPI users documentation. You just set it up one time and then you're good to go. You don't need to memorize it. Just bear with me. So now what we're going to do is we're going to have the reset password token secret and the verification token secret both being equal to the same thing, which is a secret. Can make it different if you want, but that's all that we need. Now we actually don't need to do anything else inside of this class, but I just want to show you that we can write various functions here so that we can handle things that happen when a user registers, when they forget their password, or when they are requesting to, for example, verify their token. So what you can do is you can hook into all of these common user operations that are going to automatically be written for you by FastAPI users. So we can do something like async define, and then you can see there's a function like on after register. And this is a function that's automatically handled for us. And what we can do is we can just say, print, user has registered. And there you go, right? So after the user registers, boom, this print function will run. And if we wanted to do something specific, we could do that inside of here. We could have another one like async define and then on after forgot password, right? And then boom, we can do something. On after request verify, and then we can do something. I'm just showing you some examples if you could hook into these. If you look into the FastAPI users docs and you can control what's happening based on certain operations, it will be automatically handled for you. So now what we're going to do is we're going to write a quick function. We're going to say async define get underscore user underscore manager. And we're going to say the user DB is equal to SQL Alchemy user database. And this is equal to depends get user DB. Okay. We're then going to yield the user manager with the user DB. So essentially we're taking our database user, kind of injecting that inside of here. And now we have this user manager class, which will allow us to manage the users in FastAPI. We then are going to have the bearer underscore transport, which is equal to the bearer transport. And then we're going to have our token URL be equal to auth/jwt/login. So when someone wants to log in, they go to this endpoint and then they can pass their credentials and they can log in as a user. We're then going to say define get underscore JWT underscore strategy. And this is going to return JWT strategy. We're going to pass our secret and we're going to pass our lifetime seconds. Now, the lifetime seconds is how long you want a JWT token to be valid before the user needs to sign in again. I believe this is 3,600 seconds, which is going to be, 10 minutes or 1 hour or something? Yeah, I think this is 1 hour, so 60 minutes is 3,600 seconds. So you can change how long you want the token to be alive for, essentially, and if you want to invalidate the token after a certain period of time. By default, JWT tokens have some lifespan. The longer you make them, the more convenient it is for users, but also the less secure, because that means someone could come onto your computer, for example, and they would be able to just start using the application because the JWT token is still alive. Okay, now we have the JWT strategy. We're going to define the auth backend, which is going to be equal to the authentication backend. We're going to say the name is equal to JWT. The transport is the bearer transport. And we're going to say get strategy is get JWT strategy. Okay, we're then going to say FastAPI users is equal to FastAPI users, user UUID.UUID, get user manager, and auth backend. So when we define FastAPI users, what we do is we specify this is the user model that we're using, and this is how we get the user manager. This is the backend that we're using, which is JWT tokens. Then we say the current active user is equal to FastAPI users.current user active equals true. What this is going to do is when we call this current active user function, it's going to automatically give us the current active user by going and checking the user's JWT token. Again, I know this stuff is confusing. You're not going to understand a lot of the stuff that's being written. The point is this framework, when you do the little bit of setup that we're doing here, will automatically handle all of the authentication for you. We just need to kind of hook it up and do this setup. Once we do this setup, all the JWT auth will be handled automatically, and all you need to do is just use this, which you're going to see. So now we've written everything that we need for users.py. So what we're going to do is go back to app.py, and we're going to start actually using this, because now we need to essentially connect different endpoints to this, JWT kind of backend, which you're going to see. So now that we've done that, we're going to import this. So we're going to say from app.users, and we're going to import the auth backend. Okay, we're going to import the current active user, and we're going to import FastAPI users. Now what we're going to do is for our app, we're essentially going to connect the different auth endpoints that we need to our FastAPI users endpoint. So you'll see what I mean in a second, but we're going to say the following. We're going to say at app.include_router, and we're going to include the FastAPI users dot get _auth _router with the auth _backend, and we're going to say the prefix for this is equal to /auth/JWT, and we can say the tags is equal to auth. Now what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, in my app, I want to include all of the endpoints that are automatically provided by FastAPI users. So I'm just going to say app.include_router, and I'm going to connect it to all of the endpoints here. And I'm going to prefix this with /auth/JWT, which means I go to /auth/JWT plus all of the endpoints that are automatically included by my FastAPI users kind of module that I brought in here. Okay, so things like resetting your password. After you forget the password, what happens? All of those endpoints are automatically written and handled here for you, and we just include them into our app. You'll see what I mean in a second. Essentially, we're just including some routes that are automatically written inside of FastAPI users in our app. Okay, now we're going to keep going because there's some more routes that we need to include. So we're going to say app.include_router, and this is going to be FastAPI users.getRegister routes. This time, we're going to prefix it with /auth, and the tags will be auth. However, for the register routes, we need to pass in some schemas, which we're going to write in a second, which is user read and user create. And then we're going to go write those in schemas. So let's do that really quickly and then come back and I can explain what we need. So for user read, what we need to do is we need to say from FastAPI_users import schemas. I then need to import UUID. So I'm now going to come and I'm going to say class user read, and this is going to be from schemas.base user, and this is going to be UUID.UUID. Okay, and then this is simply going to say pass. I'm then going to say class user create. This is going to be schemas.base user create, and then I'm going to say pass, and I'm going to say class user update is going to be schemas.base user update, and then pass. Now, these are schemas that automatically come from FastAPI users, but similarly to some of the schemas we had before, we need to just create our own kind of dummy schema that inherits from it that we could then override if we want to. So that's exactly what we're doing. Now we're going to go back to app, and we're going to import the schemas that we need. So from app.schemas, we're going to bring in the user read, the user create, okay, and the user update, which we'll have in a second. All right, and now this should be good to go. Okay, so that's that for the registration routes. So again, same thing, we're now going to have the ability to register, automatically be created for us. I'm going to show you this in the documentation in a second from FastAPI users. Now, if we wanted to bring in other routes, we can do that. So for example, we can say at app.include_router, And then we can say FastAPI users dot get reset password router, right? And now if we do that, we now have the ability to reset the password. Now let's keep going. Let's say app.include router, and we can do the get verify router. Now this one we actually need because it will allow us to verify user. So we bring that in, and then notice automatically we bring in user read. And then lastly, we can have get users router. So I'm gonna say app.include router, get users router, and then we can include the user read and the user update. Okay, so let's quickly just reload this. And I'm just gonna shut this down and restart it. So that we can test and make sure it's working. So now if I go here, you can see that I have all these new routes that are popping up, right? Like login, register, forgot password, reset password, request verify token, verify, users me, users ID, right? All of this kind of stuff that I'm able to now utilize because I'm using FastAPI users. Again, I'm not gonna go through literally every single thing here, but I will show you the basics. So what I wanna do now is I want to register a new account. So what I can do to register is I can go try it out, and I'm just going to do a new account here. So I'll go tim@techwithtim.net, and then for the password, we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, we'll just make is active true, and then we won't set anything for the super user is verified. You can change these so you don't pass these when you register later on, but for now in kind of debug mode, that's what we're doing. So actually, let me just change this like tim1@techwithtim.net. Let's execute this, and then it's going to now give me my ID, my email, and then all of this information. And now what I can do is I can sign in with this user. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to authorize. I'm going to pass my email and my super secure password, and press on authorize, and now it's going to essentially sign me in. Now that I'm signed in, it's going to give me this token, and what will happen is whenever I send any requests, it's going to use this token. So now I can go to, for example, users/me, and I can just send the request here, and you're going to see that it tells me, hey, I am tim1@techwithtim.net. And notice that automatically this super long token was included in my request, because that's how this works. So if you sign in here with authorize, then by default, this token that identifies you is going to be sent in all of the future requests as you're using this documentation, and you're going to be able to verify if you're a user, or if you're signed in, or if you're not signed in, etc. So now all the user stuff is working. However, we need to associate users with the posts, and we need to make it so that I can't actually call these endpoints like upload, feed, or post unless I'm signed in. So let's do that. So I'm going to go to main.py. And the way that I can make some of these routes what's called protected is I can add a dependency that forces the route to get the current active user. And if the current active user doesn't exist, it won't let me call this endpoint. So for example, to be able to actually make an upload, well, I need to have a user, right? Like I need to be signed in as a user. So what I can do is I can just change the function to be like this. So I can just say user, and then I can say user, and I can say this is equal to depends, and this is current active user like that. For user, I can just import that from my database. So let's just import user like so. And now what will happen is if I try to call this function and I'm not signed in and I cannot get the current active user, this function will not work. So literally all you have to do now is if you want to protect these routes, you just add this dependency. So for example, for the feed, same thing. We add the user, we say, okay, this is to get current active user. And now it won't work unless we have the user. Now, same thing for the posts. We're going to get the current active user. So let's do that. And we're going to have to change some of the content of these functions now so that it actually saves the user that is doing this operation. So let's go back to the DB. And for our posts, we're now associating with users. Okay, so that's all good. But for our app, when we are uploading images, we now need to associate them with that user. So for our upload result here, let's take user_ID, and let's make this equal to the user.id. So now we're storing the particular user for every single post. Okay, so that's good. That's all we need to do there. Then for deleting the post, we need to only allow the user to do this if they're signed in as the correct user. So once we check for the post, down here, we're going to say if the post.user_ID does not equal the user.id, then we need to raise HTTP exception. So let's do this. Okay. And we're going to say status code 403, which means unauthorized. You don't have permission to delete this post. So now if I try to create a post with an account that didn't make this post, or sorry, I try to delete a post with an account that didn't make it, it's not going to allow me to do that. Okay, so now we've just added the authorization check, and I think that is pretty much good. Now we're going to go to get feed, and for get feed, we're going to make some enhancements here so that we actually know which user made these posts in the feed. So first things first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to include the user ID in my response here. So I'm going to say user underscore ID is equal to the string of post.user underscore ID. And I'm also going to include if we are the owner of this post so that the front end knows that. So we're going to say is owner, and we're going to say post.user underscore ID is equal to user.id. So now we're checking, all right, is the user ID of this post equal to our ID? If it is, that means we made it. If it's not, well, we didn't make it. Okay, and then I think that should pretty much be good, but there's one last thing actually that we will do. Okay, so for every single one of our posts, I also want to include some basic information about the user, and in this case, that's going to be their email. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the user's email. So I'm going to say email, and then I'm going to say this is post.user.email. And I think that will work, but I'm not 100% sure. Let's see. Okay, so now we kind of have protected our endpoints so that only authorized users are able to use this. And that should pretty much wrap up the API. But of course, we want to test this. And then I'm just going to have a little simple front end that I'll show you how to use so we can actually see it visually. All right, so let's authorize ourselves by signing in with that account. So we're going to say tim1@techwithtim.net. Okay, if we can spell this correctly. All right, then we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and authorize. Okay, so now let's go, okay, that's fine. From here, let's go to the feed and let's try to get the feed. Okay, and when we get the feed, it gives us internal server error. Let's see what the problem is there. Okay, and of course, the error came from this where I'm getting the post.user.email. That is not working properly just due to how we're loading the users. So I'm going to do another approach here that's a little bit more complicated, but will allow us to get the emails. So I'm just going to say result is equal to await. This is going to be session.execute. And I'm going to say select user. Then what I'm going to do is say users is equal to row 0 for row in result.all. Then I'm just going to create a list of all of my users. This is not the most efficient way to do this, but for this example, it's fine. So we're going to say user dictionary is equal to, and this is going to be u.id, and this is going to be u.email for you in users. Okay, now what we're able to do is we're going to be able to get the user's email like this. So to get the email, we can simply say user underscore dict, and then this is going to be .get, and it will be post.user.id. Otherwise, we'll just put unknown. Okay, so now this, if we save, it should reload. Okay, and now if we go back to the feed, let's try it again, and you see now that we get the post, and it is working and saying we are not the owner of this post because we were not signed in as that user. So now if I take this post ID, right, and if I try to delete this post, you're going to see that it doesn't work. So let's go here because I'm not signed in as the correct user. So let's go here and try to delete, execute, and you see it says you don't have permission to delete the post. Perfect. Okay, so that wraps up the API. The API is working, it's fully functioning. The next thing that I'll quickly show you is how we can get a nice little user interface here so we can actually play around with the UI. Now, I'm not going to write the user interface from scratch. If you want all of the code for this, it will be linked in the description down below. You can simply copy it and paste it inside of here. What I'm going to do is just make a new file, and I'm just going to call this frontend.py. I'm just going to copy a bunch of code that I've written previously, which is the front end, and paste it in here, okay? Now, this code uses something called Streamlit, which is something that we need to install. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep our backend running. We're going to go into a new terminal, and we're going to type uv add Streamlit. Now that's going to add Streamlit to our dependencies, which is going to allow us to now run this front end. So again, all of this code that you see will be available from the link in the description. You can literally just copy it into a file called front end, and this is going to handle essentially interacting with the API that we just spent all of that time writing. I will go over how it works in a second, but let's just quickly test it. So to do this, I'm going to type essentially uv run Streamlit run main dot, or not main, this is front end.py. When I do that, it will start running Streamlit. It should just open it in your browser, and then you have a user interface. What you can do is you can type in an account, so like tim@techwithtim.net. You can type in the password. When you do that, you can either sign up and make a new account, or you can just log in. And if you press login, it should bring you now, let's wait a second, to the feed. Failed to get user info. Okay, interesting. So we'll fix that in a second. But it should bring you to the feed once I fix this problem. Okay, and you can see here that it now loads the feed. We have my username, the date, the image, and then we can delete this, and we can also expand it directly from here. Now, I want to talk about kind of how this works, so I'll walk through the code a little bit, but again, just copy the code from the link in the description. It's not really valuable for me to write this out with you because this is not a tutorial on Streamlit. Now, first things first, the JWT token is something that we store in our session. That just means that we're storing it so that we're constantly using it anytime we send a request to the backend. Okay, the way that you send JWT token requests is you include bearer plus the JWT token, and then when you do that, you're able to actually send an authenticated request. You saw this in the examples when we were looking at the documentation from FastAPI, but I'm just doing it directly, kind of manually here in Python. Again, I'll show you how the request kind of looks in a second. So here is the login page, right? So when I want to log in, what I'm doing is I'm just passing a username and a password, and I'm passing it to this URL. So auth JWT login, right? Passing my data, and then I'm able to log in. Now, when I do that, I get some token data, and I store that access token in my state, so I'm able to use it as my JWT token to sign in. I then get my user info by passing a request to user/me so I can make sure that I'm signed in successfully, and I store that again in my session state. Same thing for registering. I send a request to auth/register, and then after I register, I send another request to get my JWT token so that I'm good to go. Okay, now we have the upload page. On the upload page, what I do is I have files, right? So I have a file, which is the uploaded file that I select, which I'm going to show you in a second, and I have a caption. I then include that in the request to upload, right? As well as my headers, which include my JWT token. That's then able to upload the image and then show it on the feed. Now, the cool part here is when we start talking about actually displaying the images with ImageKit, because it makes it super easy for us to view the images and to actually perform transformations on them. So let me show you with the UI. If I go here and I go to upload, okay, so let's go to upload. Let's change this here and let's upload here, this one with Munib and me, which is a testimonial. I'm going to say, hello world, dev launch worked, okay, because this helped him land a job. Let's go share, and then it's going to upload this file for me to my backend API. And if I go back to the feed now, it just takes a second to load, we'll see the image appears here. And one thing you'll notice if I make these larger is that we have this caption that I'm kind of putting directly on top of the images by using ImageKit, where I say, hello world, dev launch worked. Now it's quite small. I'm going to show you how to make it larger, but the way that I do that is from my UI before I load the image. So if we go down here, let's do this. You can see that I have these file types. So I check if it's an image, which is all we've done right now, but I'll show you videos in a second. Then what we'll do is we will essentially transform the URL to use the transformation that puts the caption directly on top of it that looks like this. So this is essentially the text that you use if you want to add a caption. If I want to make it bigger, I can say like font size 100, and then it will make it much larger, and then it directly transforms the image from me from this one URL and passes it back very quickly. Okay, so that's how I'm kind of transforming this. Now I want to show you uploading a video, which we'll do in 1 second, and then displaying the caption for that video, but that's kind of how I'm doing that transformation with ImageKit and displaying the images. So let's go back, and now if I refresh this, let's sign in again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And go log in. Then let's wait a second here. Okay, and we'll go to the feed. And okay, get rid of that. And you can see now it's quite a bit larger because I made the font size 100. If I made it like 1,000, obviously it would be even much bigger. And you can see the text shows up on the image. Now, if I want to upload a video, I can totally do that as well. So let's go files and let me find a video. Okay, so I just found this screen recording that's not that big. So I'm just going to upload this screen recording. So you can see right there. Going to go ahead and press on share. Because it is a video, it will take a little bit longer to upload, so we'll just wait for that to complete. And then as soon as it's uploaded, okay, so let's go back to the feed here. We should be able to see it directly from ImageKit. You see it's going to take 1 second to load here. And then there you go, we get the video and we can watch it, right? And it just shows up directly here. Now, same thing with when we transform the images, we can transform the video. So let me show you a few examples of how we actually do that. Let's go here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put in some transformation parameters. Right now, you can see that I'm just putting it quality at max and width 300, but I can adjust this to, for example, crop the video. So for example, if I just take this transformation parameter, I'll just show you what this does, but essentially it crops the video and then adds a blurred background and puts it in vertical format for me. In this case, it's already vertical, but if it wasn't vertical, it would do that. So if I go back to my, example here, UI, let's just go back to the feed so it reloads. Okay, and actually you can see that this did work now. So it resized to be quite small, and you can see now that we have kind of this video like in the middle, and then we have this blurred background, which is exactly what I got the transformation to do. The quality is quite low, obviously, because of how I adjusted it and the size that I made it, but you can see that it is working. And sorry if I just scared you there with that audio. That scared me as well, but the point is, it is loading. Cool, so I think that's pretty much it, guys. I mean, that covers everything that I wanted to show you. We made a application that's able to post photos and videos, is able to handle user auth, connected to a database, has all kinds of different more advanced features that you typically don't see in more beginner tutorials. And while I know this was a really long video and a lot of code, I want it to be super detailed and covered everything in as much depth as I possibly can. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.